What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Cervantes podcast. Joining me today to discuss whether or not Black athletes have a responsibility to use their platform and speak out against injustice, police brutality, and racism is actor, drama major, and Hofstra University D1 Ultimate Frisbee player Dianté Ferguson, and business law major and Hofstra University men's track and field player Gavin Jones. How are you guys? How are you doing?
Hey, what's up? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
So, Michael Jordan has famously not been very vocal about social and political issues. In the ESPN documentary The Last Dance, Michael Jordan finally and unapologetically acknowledged saying Republicans buy sneakers too, calling it an off-the-cuff joke to his Chicago Bulls teammates. I don't think that statement needs to be corrected because I said it in a jest on a bus, Jordan said. Jordan also described why he steered clear of politics and Black advocacy during his playing career, which began in 1984 and made him one of the most popular people on the planet by the time he won his sixth championship in 1998. I never thought of myself as an activist. I thought of myself as a basketball player, he said. I wasn't a politician. I was playing my sport. I was focused on my craft. So I wanted to ask you, how do you guys feel about this?
Me personally, I feel like a lot of people go into athletics not really expecting to have that type of platform. I mean, your entire athletic career, you're kind of working on building yourself up. So you start from such a low position where you kind of feel like your opinion doesn't hold as much value. But once you start to get to those higher platforms, whether that be professional sports, whether that be, Division One, overseas, any other type of professional league, I feel like once you get to that level, and people can start seeing you and start like they can start matching their opinions based on what you're saying. I feel like once you gain that type of platform, I think it's really important that you do kind of speak on those type of issues. When we look at NBA legends, just even in NBA with Michael Jordan, his legendary status cannot be rectified in any other situation. Like everybody knows, when they hear Michael Jordan, they know his name. But I feel like when it comes to social activism and when it comes to speaking up against issues that maybe be a bit more political, I feel like it's important to do so because of the fact that it doesn't just affect kids and people who watch sports. It affects people who maybe didn't even know you watch sports. When you speak about NBA legends like Bill Russell, Oscar Robertson, these guys were involved in the deepest of deep protests when it came to the civil rights movements back in the 1960s. And even they were even on the FBI's most wanted list for some time because of the
Wow.
fact
Okay.
that FBI were keeping tracks on NBA players, current NBA players, because they were so involved. And when they see you as, when you have the FBI, people like that watching over you, I feel like your impact is a lot larger. People will listen to you a lot more. And that's what you're seeing now with LeBron, where he's starting to speak out and, cause reform on a lot of these issues, and people are backing him. You're starting to see it's gaining a lot more movement with, his efforts to try and prevent voting suppression, and all those different types of things. I feel like it's really important.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think it's important that as a Black athlete, you need to recognize like you're a Black person at the end of the day. And I think that's how the world sees you. Like when you're driving around late at night, like it's not gonna be, oh, the NBA player, the rich guy, like you're Black. And I think you should like educate yourself before you speak on things, but I think you should definitely say something, especially if you like Michael Jordan did a lot. Like he was doing commercials, endorsements, all this other stuff, Space Jam. Like you can't just support your fellow Black people. Like I don't know.
Exactly. I feel like
you
a
know?
lot of times when it gets to that level, you're solely focused on the money. It becomes more of a money game. And because a lot of those political issues don't really bring in the money, more in fact, they take away from it. A lot of like people who've built, like I said, who've built themselves up, they don't want to lose their money. And it's like a battle between whether you feel like you should fight for, your people, your rights, your at the end of the day, your motives, or keep the
Right,
money, play it safe. And that's like, I feel like that's what the struggle a lot of people have is.
right. And you, Deontay, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Gavin has said. Like you have people like Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Serena Williams and Russell Wilson, people who built up to this elite stature. Them going in and speaking about these issues, I think is something very important. And I think as being an athlete, something that I've taken notice about is when you're, like Gavin said, when you're starting out, you don't want to you might not want to go into talking about these issues because it could affect you in the long run. It could affect how your fans view you, and if your fans view you negatively, it could lead to you maybe getting released or traded. But when you have that stature like Michael Jordan and LeBron, you can basically talk about any social inequalities and racial injustices, and everyone will listen to you. Everyone might not agree with you, but you'll still get people to listen to you. And the people who do listen to you and your supporters, they will help you make that impact and that change.
Right.
Something with that I looked up with Michael Jordan was how the Jordan brand over the next 10 years is donating $100 million to improve racial inequality and social
Oh,
justice
okay.
and things like that. Yeah, and that was actually it was said by Jordan after the tragedy of George Floyd. But I think for a player like Michael Jordan, someone who is retired and to still make this impact, because I know as a player he wasn't really into the political aspects of things. Um, I looked at an article where his former teammate Craig Hodges told the media that he didn't know what to say, when it came to political that aspect of things. So he wasn't a bad person, but he just didn't know what to say. And I took that and kind of realized, yeah, I get that, but you're Michael Jordan in your prime. Uh, in the mid 90s, you already have 3 championships. So it's like you
Right.
everyone's looking at you. You have the biggest platform in the world at that time. So
Yeah.
use it to your benefit. And like you said, we're all black at the end of the day. And that's something that kind of irritates me too. Like going off, I don't know if you two remember when the interviewer um talked about LeBron James and we're just saying shut up and dribble.
Yes, I forgot her name. Yes.
Yeah, that is something that very irritated me the most because you can have all this money and all this fashion and whatnot, but at the end of the day, we're still black. You cannot change that. We are born
Yeah.
that way.
I think it was
So
Laura Ingraham, who was the Fox reporter who said that.
yeah,
The Fox reporter who's like just kept telling him to shut up and dribble and stuff like that.
yeah,
That's so crazy because it's like you we're like you said, we're black at the end of the day. And also people are more than just athletes. Like
yes,
your life does not revolve around basketball or tennis or soccer. Like I think you should have a life outside of that because you're not gonna be an
exactly.
athlete for the rest of your life. One day you're gonna coach or start a business or open up a school like LeBron, and he's still doing it. So
Hmm.
yeah, I agree. Why do you guys think some famous athletes are hesitant to use their platform to speak out against injustice?
I think we might have maybe touched on it, but I feel like it's more of the fear of losing what you've built up yourself. I feel like when you put yourself in a position to provide for your family, to provide for others who've helped you along the way, when you put yourselves in those type of positions, or even when you haven't and you're still working towards that. It's difficult to make the decision when a lot of times when people aren't going to agree with you, because a lot of these institutions that will give these athletes money, like the NFL, the NBA, MLB, a lot of these major American leagues, they're white owned. It's white owned, so a lot of the times if you speak out, there's going to be backlash. So it's more about, I feel like it comes with the money. It's more about, do you want to risk that? And maybe there's a chance a lot of people back you and you gain more popularity and you gain more status and you make the impact that you wanted. Or there's the chance that a lot of people disagree with you, the people that are important, that matter the most, the CEOs, the owners of the team, the coaches, people like that, they disagree with you and maybe they start playing you less, maybe they start paying you less, which is more important. So I feel like that's mainly the fear that revolves around black athletes trying to speak up, because you're scared, you don't know, you've worked so hard to put yourself in that position.
Yeah. And you, Deontay?
Yeah, that's about the same exact answer I had. I think it really comes down to the coaches, the front offices, the owners, and I feel as though with NFL, NBA, all the major sports, being predominantly white, you have with the owners and everything. you have them urging players not to speak out on these issues because it distracts the team or it might create an uproar and make the team look bad and things like that. So not only that, and then you have other instances when players, like Gavin said, don't want to risk the chance of getting released or in getting paid less and getting traded. So it's just like I think they should still find a way to be able to always be able to speak out about these things, but just the barriers that they have to overcome in their own team and things like that is a major issue.
Yeah, because it's like sometimes I remember when like Colin Kaepernick kneeled. I wanted LeBron James to kneel, and my friends were
Yeah.
like, Cervantes, he's not going to do that. And I was like, yeah, you have a point because I want people to speak out, but I also don't want you to lose your job, like Black people.
Yes.
So
I think the Colin Kaepernick situation was a big indicator that a lot of these times when things happen afterwards, like after you speak out, it's not explicit. It's not all the way. It's going to be in the front of the news. They can't do that legally. They legally can't just be like, oh, you spoke out against this issue, so we're going to release you. It's secret. It's in, they'll push it under the radar. So they'll be like,
they're going to find some type of loophole in the contract.
Exactly. So they'll start finding little things to, push you out of. And maybe, they'll say, hey, we'll trade you away to this terrible team when you were already in a great position. So your career takes a downturn. And then they'll say, hey, you know what? We're going to start paying you less. And maybe they call another owner and they say, hey, you know what? But maybe take his salary down a little bit. And these things happen behind the scenes. Like I said, because a lot of these leagues are white owned, there's nobody to sit there and say, whoa, what are you doing? There's nobody in that position as of right now. Or maybe, there are some people, but they can't fight an entire system. So it's like these things are underhanded.
Right, like I know Jay-Z's working with the NFL, which is great, but he's only one person and he doesn't.
Exactly.
To my knowledge, I don't think he owns anything yet.
Not as of yet. Which I remember when he joined the team, there was so much backlash because they were like, why is he teaming up with the NFL after they've done all these horrible things? And I'm like, the more we start implementing people,
exactly.
That's for you guys. Should athletes and public figures, notable people, should they be role models? And are they role models?
I think they can be. I think a lot of people, especially children, when you're playing these sports, when you're doing these things as younger, you look up to them. You know these names, you learn these names. A lot of time when people talk about sports fans, they don't really think about it like this. But a lot of times, sports fans, they have their own, they have just as much intelligence as somebody who's in a STEM, who's somebody's in a chemistry major. You're remembering all these different names of all these different players on all these different teams. And these things are ingrained into your head. There's certain Knicks players that I'll have in my head for the rest of my life. There's certain NFL players I'll have in my head for the rest of their life. So when you learn these names and you know these people, their voice matters. So when I hear LeBron speaking about all these issues and advocating for all these different funds, I wouldn't know about a lot of these things if it weren't for him speaking out. If it weren't for him speaking out, So I think they should be considered role models.
Right. And you, Dianté?
Yeah, I definitely think they should be considered role models, and I definitely think they are role models. When you have, the platform that they have, whether it's big like LeBron James or a bit smaller, you still have that platform. You still have those set fans of the team who they might not know much about you as a player, but when you're on their team, that's when they're like, oh, I gotta know more about this guy and see what he's doing to help out. He's on the team. I gotta support him. I gotta support the team and everything. So I think that's a reason why they are looked at to as role models. Another thing about players looked up to as role models, I think majority is a benefit, but in some instances it can be like a problem. Um, Outside of the Black community, for example, like when you have athletes speaking up about these injustices, you have fans that are not minority coming in and saying, "Oh my goodness, LeBron, I looked up to you from the beginning of your career. Now you're talking about Black Lives Matter. It should be all lives matter." And about ignorant, displaying their ignorance and stuff like that. So you always have your critics and you always have, those type of fans.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then sometimes I think athletes could kind of feel discouraged, the white people are upset, but it's it's okay to make some people upset. You're not going to please everyone, you know. And I
Exactly.
think,
Yeah.
and I think, LeBron and Serena and all these Steph Curry, they have millions of followers. So I think what you say and what you post on Instagram and all that stuff, your press conferences, is very important. Your YouTube channel, that has a big influence. The whole world is watching you. So I feel like you have to be very responsible of what you
Yeah.
say and what you put out and like what you stand with, you know. I think some of them should be role model. It's hard because
I
some
think
people I don't
it
look.
should be distinguished because I think what's important to note is that even from LeBron, when LeBron first got out of high school, he was 18, 19. He was drafted into the league. He was the cover of almost every sports magazine there was.
Yeah,
He was getting Jordan dealerships straight out of high school. People were watching him in high school. He was packing out stadiums, packing out gyms, packing out everything. Same thing Zion Williamson, packing out gyms
right.
and stuff. And these kids are young. They don't fully understand these injustices, especially when they're
Yeah.
coming from, a lot of these prep schools that are, mainly majority white. They might not be all black. So they're not learning their full history. And I don't think a lot of schools are teaching full history, full black history. So they don't understand fully the injustices that are going on. So when I think a lot of these younger athletes speak up and they'll be like, hey, maybe we don't want to get involved, and they'll speak up about all these different things, but they don't fully have that proper perspective. So I think it's important that we focus a lot on making sure that those kids, or whether they, gain the spotlight or whether they don't gain the spotlight, they're being educated properly so that when they do get to that point in their career, whether that be, the NCAA, the, March Madness, or whether that be, straight out of high school or even in high school, they have the proper tools, the proper knowledge to be like, hey, I understand this issue. This is what's going on, rather than just putting the spotlight on them and being like, hey, what do you know? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And then they say something wrong. And automatically
Right.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah, I'd rather you educate yourself and stay silent, maybe do things
exactly.
behind the scenes, rather than like you're super vocal but you don't know what you're
You
talking
don't
about.
know what you
Yeah.
exactly.
Right,
That's a
right.
lot of people these days. That's a
Exactly.
lot of
Yeah,
people
talking
these
about
days.
slavery was a choice. Like what?
Right.
Exactly. It's a lot of, it's really like a lot of people, because when you're in these prep schools, that's why a lot of athletes they can't go straight out of high school. They go to, either, predominantly white institution, a big NCAA school where they're surrounded by a lot of other middle class, mainly white people, or, middle class, individuals who don't really understand, who've never really experienced
Yeah,
inequality or injustice, or whether it's, one of these prep schools where you have to pay a bunch of money and it's all rich kids and stuff. You don't really gain that proper perspective, and you're surrounded by other people who don't have it. So when they're just feeding you information, it's scary how twisted their opinions can become, especially at a young age.
yeah. I could totally speak to that. Like I went to a prep high school, Iona Prep,
Yeah,
and for Black History Month, we had like one assignment,
yeah,
like that was it. And like
exactly.
moved on.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we're being taught by white people. The class is full of white people. So like you said, there's gonna be a weird bias. We're
Yeah,
not being educated properly on Black history, which is American history. Like
exactly. Even, I went to a predominantly white high school on Long Island, and I remember in at least 10th or 11th grade, I had a teacher who, made an assignment. We were teaching slavery. She made an assignment of splitting the class in half and having one half argue about, the benefits of slavery, the
what?
value, the finances and how it benefited all the countries and stuff. And the other class had to debate the negatives of slavery. And she was like, "There's a fair debate here," and I'm sitting there in the back like,
What
well,
is
this
going
doesn't,
on?
a lot of these kids are going to carry this type of information into their lives. They're going to become doctors, lawyers, educators, all these different other things, and they have these bigoted mindsets that make them believe that there was any positives in slavery. There was all these. No, that's not true, and it's like,
Whereas a
Yeah.
Black teacher, or maybe
exactly,
someone that's not Black but just educated,
educated themselves,
wouldn't
exactly,
say something like that and wouldn't
exactly,
debate the pros and cons of slavery. That's
exactly.
crazy. That's crazy. As guys who play and like to watch sports, who are some notable Black athletes that you look up to?
So myself, to be honest, obviously LeBron is a big name that speaks up on a lot of different issues. I also watch a lot of soccer, so internationally, I know that Marcus Rashford, he advocates for a lot of Black Lives Matter and for a lot of underprivileged kids programs. He actually got over at least 600,000 meals to kids in, hunger situations and all these different things like that. I think in the U.S., however, Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes, who run their own podcast called All the Smoke, they speak up a lot on these types of issues, especially after George Floyd. Steven Jackson was a former NBA player. He was with George's family a lot. Apparently, that was his cousin. George Floyd was his cousin, so he was super involved in the protests, super involved in the movement. Obviously, you have Steph Curry, you have all these different types of players. So I think there's a lot of Black athletes that are now starting to pick up the ball where they saw a lot of people step up last year.
Oh, that's nice. And you, Dianté, who are some athletes you look up to?
Yeah, like athletes like LeBron, Kobe, before he passed away, but still, Serena Williams, Russell Wilson, Stephen Curry, like all these great athletes who not only excel, in their respective sports to the highest degree, but have never hesitated to speak up about social and political issues, and never hesitated to donate and provide awareness to these issues are things that I greatly appreciate.
Yeah, I didn't know maternal mortality was such a huge issue for Black women until I think Serena said something, or like I think the Field documentary. So I think that's very important. Like you can lend your voice, which everyone's gonna listen to things that people don't know about or people don't necessarily care about or not educated on. So yeah, that's dope. In the 49ers' third preseason game in 2016, Colin Kaepernick sat during the playing of the U.S. national anthem prior to the game, rather than stand as is customary as a protest against racial injustice, police brutality, and systematic oppression in the country. He has not played professionally since the 49ers' final game of that season on January 1st, 2017. Looking back, do you think what Colin Kaepernick did was smart, risking his job to take a stand against injustice and police brutality in the United States?
I think in a situation like that, I don't think he realized it at the time. Maybe he just, was making a bold statement that he wanted to make. But I think honestly, he was a sacrifice. It was a sacrificial piece. I think he took the step that somebody needed to take. Somebody needed to be the one to step forward and be the first one. Either they take the fall on everything, and that's kind of what happened. He did take the fall. He lost his job. He lost a lot of his positions of power and status, all because of this one movement. But this one movement was able to affect so many other different areas that we don't even realize today. With LeBron speaking out now, he always references back to how Colin Kaepernick took that first step. There was a lot of players in the MLB when they start their games now, a lot of the time, or at least last season, they would kneel before the games. A lot of pretty much every soccer league internationally, they have players kneel for 30 seconds before every single game starts.
Wow.
People didn't even think about, kneeling as maybe a sign of solidarity with the military and other things like that. But people didn't really see kneeling for Black lives as something that was important or something that was necessary, or even just recognizing Black bodies in sports. And I think that Colin Kaepernick took that fall, and I think it was smart in the long run, but maybe not for him, because he was able to, he didn't, he obviously lost a lot through that one experience. But I think in the long run, for everybody else, it was a really big moment. And I think it was smart.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you, Dianté?
Yeah, I definitely believe it was the right thing to do because of how it changed like the current landscapes of sports, as well as the future of sports, especially the NFL. How they like implemented rules like I believe if you sign a Black head coach, even though it's a step in the right direction, but it's still a bit absurd. Like if you sign a Black coach, you get like an extra draft pick or something like that. It might sound absurd that it's not more, but I do think it's the step in the right direction. However, I do think with Kaepernick in general, I would say for him, it was a bit of bad timing. And like Gavin said, of him being that sacrificial lamb. If he would have spoke out a bit earlier in his career when he was still playing at that elite level, I feel as though he would still be in the league today. But the time that he did it, he was kind of on the decline, and using the kneeling to provide awareness gave, the GM and the owners and
The
the coaches
excuse.
that
Yeah.
extra, boost to push him off the team and, make him a backup quarterback and things like that. But I do think, like I said, that him doing that definitely changed the landscape of sports. And not only has it translated in the NFL, it is translated in the NBA, it is translated in tennis, baseball,
Right.
hockey, soccer, everywhere is translated. So even though it affected him and his career, it also affected for the greater good.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think that it sparked like a conversation in the country. And I think Colin Kaepernick definitely needed to do that. Especially with like the NFL and like professional playing professional sports. The only thing is I wish that that they gave him his job back. Even though he has money and I'm sure he's chilling, I think he deserves to get his job. I don't think you should get fired for something like that. It's not like it's not like he abused anyone. He didn't curse anyone out. He didn't fight anyone. So I feel like he's just speaking up for his people and his community. So I think he deserves his job back. And also, I'm happy that Nike stood behind him and gave him that, because I think that endorsement was big of them. They didn't have to do that. Were you nervous ever to speak about injustice as an athlete or just a person in general?
I kind of was, to be honest. I think it first kind of hit me that, it was kind of a responsibility that I need to do, during quarantine when, a lot of these issues started popping up. And like I said, coming from a majority white town and then moving into a predominantly white institution, and just becoming, my sophomore year, joining the track team, it was a bit difficult because I didn't know where I stood with a lot of people at Hofstra, and then I knew what life was like back home. So I knew that if I stood up, if I said something, if I made as big a deal of it that I wanted to, that it would face a lot of backlash. And it did. It faced, a lot of backlash. Whereas, kids from the university that I knew through sports were personally DMing me and telling me, "Oh, you're so dumb. You're so this, that, da, 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 you're so ignorant. This doesn't matter. What about all lives?" And da, da, da. And I had to, remove those people from my life. A lot of people from home, almost like, I was losing almost hundreds of followers a day, to be honest.
Wow.
This, that, and the third. And, it was kind of it was a bit sad, to be honest, seeing so many people exit, exit the door and, face that backlash. But I think at the end of the day, afterwards, I felt a lot better about it, just because of the fact that I knew that, how I truly felt was already out there. So people that were still with me, I knew that I could trust those people. I knew that I could, depend on those people to care about my body if I were the person that was in that situation, if I were George Floyd, rather than just automatically revert to them finding some random criminal history of me in detention in 8th grade. And now I'm a bad person.
Right.
All these people are, speaking bad about me. But I think I felt better about it. I definitely was scared, though.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And you, Dianté?
Yeah, when I initially joined the men's ultimate frisbee team, I believe I was one of only 2 Black players on the team. So
Wow.
speaking up about it was something that I was nervous about, because I'm like, these guys, are white, who knows if they care, who knows if they even support. But fortunately they do. And fast forward today, us as a team, we had these conversations with each other, not only just with racial injustice in the Black community, but also in the Asian community and all the minority, the different minority groups. And that's something that I really do appreciate about this team, and something that I really love them for, because they're all, intelligent, like-minded individuals who know, who see the problem, try their best to understand the problem, and then have a group discussion about it. And things like that is stuff that I, truly respect and admire from them.
That's
And yeah.
That's very important, because I think it's their responsibility to make you comfortable, not make it awkward and not like,
Yeah.
you know, kiss your butt, but
Yeah.
make you feel comfortable and have certain conversations, because that's important. Whether you were on the team or not, they should be having those conversations.
Yeah.
Especially if there's like a lack of Black people. Yeah, of course. And not just Black people, like Hispanic, Asian, like you said, Middle Eastern, Muslim, any group that is marginalized or any minority. I completely agree with that. White people need to it's it shouldn't always be us talking and
Yeah.
getting angry, it should
Yeah.
be them, educating themselves and willing to have the conversation and learning to like listen and then say what they have to say. I can relate to Gavin because I remember in high school, I went from a public high school to a private one, and I transferred while Trump was running for office. So that
Mhm.
was that was rough.
I remember that day, to be honest, the day that he took
Yeah.
office. I remember that day because
Yeah.
every kid that had the opportunity to express the fact that they were with all of his beliefs and with him, they were Trump hats, Trump
Trump
shirts,
phone
everybody coming in.
cases. Some kid brought in like a Trump like banner or something.
Yeah.
I was like,
And
what
like
am I doing here?
in my
But yeah,
town, like I remember one of the major, uh, critiques, one of the major all lives matter protests that happened, in response to the Black Lives Matter. It happened in my town. It was like all over, national news, where it was in like Merrick, New York, Belmore, Merrick, New York, where people came out in hundreds to oppose Black Lives Matter protesters. Where Black Lives Matter, we had a protest walking down the street that was entirely peaceful, and they came out in hordes. They scheduled a huge anti-Black Lives Matter protest, and all these people came out with their kids. I recognized a lot of these families that I was seeing in the videos and pictures and stuff, and they all were coming out expressing the fact that Trump is the right, and da 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 da, and you're ignorant, and all lives matter, and why is it all about blacks? And so it was kind of like scary, because it was like I never knew that side of these people, and so to see that come out was a bit shocking. But I think overall, I think I'm smarter for expressing how I felt and speaking out about it. And I think I'm better off with the people around me.
yeah. And I think, yeah, I agree with that. I think when I finally started saying like, you can't say certain things about black because white guys love to make
They
jokes.
love to make
Yeah.
jokes and call it dark humor, dark humor and all
Right.
that type of
So
stuff.
me checking people are like, oh, like people used to call
What,
me
you've
like
never
Martin
been
Luther
like
King.
that? Yeah, you've never been like that. What's up with you? Or
Yeah, or like people used to call me like, oh, okay, Martin Luther King. And I'm just like,
exactly.
what?
It's things like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's just I can't, but I don't regret, getting into arguments and debates and all that stuff
Exactly.
because I'm not just gonna. It comes to the point where it's like you can't let people just say certain
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I always try to relate to like, you wouldn't let someone talk about your mom or your
Exactly.
family. So why am I gonna let you talk about my people, my community?
Exactly.
It's the same thing.
It's the same exact thing.
Yeah, you have to set boundaries when it comes to anything in life, especially racism. So, I don't regret that at all. What is your advice for young black kids growing up who are scared or nervous to speak about injustice that is happening within their sports team or at a school or even just in general?
I think for younger athletes and for younger sports fans, I kind of had this conversation with my little sister because she's lives in the same town, grows up with the same issues that I had to grow up with. Honestly, I just told her, look, embrace yourself, embrace everything that's good about you. You have we have so many amazing qualities, and our community is so amazing in so many ways. But I feel like a lot of kids, they become disconnected to that when they join sports. A lot of these youth leagues are run by, predominantly white families. And when you have to build your way up, you have to kind of cater to a lot of different types of white people and other minorities and stuff. Embrace what makes you amazing. Embrace what makes Black amazing. Embrace that, because there's nothing wrong with being Black. A lot of times they'll make jokes about you, and there's all these different stereotypical jokes, and Black people do this and Black. Embrace what makes Black people great. That's the best advice I can give you.
Yes, yes. You, Dianté?
Yeah, I would say always, always, always stay confident, always believe in yourself, walk with your head held up high, own the room. Don't ever silence yourself and feel like your voice should be diminished, whether you're at school or on a team. And especially if you're on a team, if there's issues going on the team that negatively impact you, you say something, you see something, you say something. And
Yeah.
if you have friends slash teammates who have a problem with you doing this, then they were never your friends to
They're
be.
not your friends.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if they have a problem with it, then maybe you don't associate yourself with them. you can be the person that creates change for the better, and the people who join you and the people who support you with this change are the people that you should have around you constantly, because these are the people who will be with you through thick and thin, and will overall just build you up to the best person that you can possibly be.
Mm.
Yeah. If people are unfollowing you because you're posting Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate or stuff like that, like those people are not supposed to be in your circle.
It
Exactly,
shows.
exactly.
It speaks more to them than it does to you.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
yes.
shows
And I
what kind
think,
of what.
what music are we listening to when we're working out or at a game? It's black music, it's hip
It's
hop,
Black music.
Yeah,
rap.
Exactly.
exactly.
So we're cool. Our, black people run the world, black creativity run the world. We are awesome, we're beautiful. And I think, don't be afraid, don't ever be afraid to check people, check racist people, check white people. Don't be afraid to do that, because I think, you saying that could probably spark a change in their head, like, oh, like maybe what I said was wrong, or like maybe I do need to read up on this,
Exactly.
or like that. Thank you guys for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. It was a
Of
great
course.
conversation.
Yes, anytime.
Of
You can
course. Of
follow
course.
Gavin at Gavin Jones and Dianté at the Ferguson brand on Instagram. Thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And be sure to leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
See ya.